Shelby, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Shelby, you've devoted many years of your career to Ukraine, and I wanted to ask you about the latest situation in Ukraine, which looks quite challenging. The Russians have been incessantly bombing the country. We see reports of widespread energy and electricity blackouts. Can you tell us something about what the state of play is in Ukraine right now?
Sure, thank you. And I've been lucky to work on focusing on Ukraine for years, really looking at U.S. policy toward Ukraine and why Ukraine matters to American security and interests. And I would say that's still relevant and that Russia's war in Ukraine is still a threat to all of us. And what they're doing now continues to show that. And so you mentioned the energy situation. It is brutal right now. Russia has been attacking the energy infrastructure throughout the full-scale invasion, but they're escalating right now with a combination of the worst temperatures, the worst freeze in Ukraine since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. So we've seen freezing temperatures throughout the country, and then just an increase in the number of missile and drone attacks in the hundreds some nights, and largely focusing on the urban centers. So Kyiv is under brutal assault right now. You've got millions of people around Ukraine that the energy infrastructure for them has been hit. So they're without heat in, the low digits of temperatures. Kyiv has massive apartment buildings. So people are living on, the 20th floor without electricity, without heat, without water. And it's not just Kyiv, it's around the rest of the country. But Russia is doing this. They're very cynical. They wait for the worst of the temperatures and hit the hardest. And you see the humanitarian impact. There's risks of hypothermia. There's disruption of essential services. So the most vulnerable people are suffering. But they're doing this while diplomatic talks continue. And speculation about if Russia is ready for peace, they show no sign of that. They show no sign of easing up on their attacks. And they continue their terror tactics against Ukraine.
Now tell me, why is Mr. Putin in such an unaccommodating mode? Is it because he thinks he can conquer the entire country, or he thinks time is on his side for the negotiations? What's your assessment?
I would say all of the above, and I would say it's not a mode. I would say it's him. This is how he is. These are his goals. He doesn't hide it. He's been saying this for years. Sometimes there's fancy talk to try to paint it in a different way. But he has these maximalist goals. You can speculate, is it psychological? Is it for his legacy? Does he feel he'll lose power? Whatever it is, it's what he wants. He doesn't see Ukraine as a real country. He wants to conquer them all. I think he hates Zelensky. He hates Ukraine. And he has aims beyond Ukraine. And he mentions that. Others in Russia mention that. And they throw out different threats to try to get their way. But we've seen over years, pressure and economic pain are the only thing they really respond to. And I don't think that Putin is feeling enough of that. So he does think he has time, and he thinks he can, get to some good deal. So why stop?
Now, there's been a lot of speculation that Russia itself is becoming exhausted from this war, and that 2026 could be a decisive year. And Ukraine, as you know, has had a number of spectacular hits inside Russia itself. What's your take on developments inside Russia?
So I'm glad you mentioned this. Russia's economy is weak. It has turned to a wartime economy. They've devoted all their resources to this. They've had to pay, large amounts to get people to go into the army and then pay out when they die, and many, many of them die. And so it's not strong, but they also cook the numbers. So we don't know the exact data, but they're in a weak economic moment, and Ukraine is making that hurt more for them with their attacks. The U.S. and Europeans and others with the sanctions also, put pain there, but they need to enforce it and do more. And then we see the shadow fleet is another source for Putin. And so, going after some more tankers would help there as well. But as for 2026 being decisive, I don't know if that means that Putin will fall, but he's certainly looking at the year. He's looking at negotiations, and The question is, does he have all the information? One never knows in an authoritarian system, but now is a moment where they shouldn't feel extremely secure in Russia, and now is a moment to keep pushing. President Trump's unpredictability could be another thing that could worry Putin. Venezuela, Putin is losing some allies around the world as well. So I think the pain should keep going on them.
That's interesting because, as you also know, many of the opponents of aid to Ukraine, and they do exist in Washington.
Yes.
Argue, they would say, well, Shelby, you've just told us the paramount reason that we don't need to get involved. What's the big whoop? Russia is flat on its back. All this talk about invading the Baltic states is hooey, and we can just sit back and let the Europeans deal with this.
It's a great point, and those critics and opponents are certainly around. And, there's a lot at stake with Russia in Ukraine. I think international law and the international order should still matter, and they're violating international law. There's humanitarian issues, but there's also more to it for NATO. And we see, sure, there's, future scenarios that could happen with the Baltics, but also right now we see Russian hybrid attacks continuing in Europe. We've seen, them looking further in the world. We see Russian influence. And so that is a threat to American security. And the cheapest and most effective way to push back on that is in Ukraine. And the Ukrainians can do it. They just need more support. And that's what they say themselves.
In a sense, we are in a Cold War with Russia right now.
In a sense.
Because, one argument, and a very different argument, has been that the Cold War actually never ended, and that Mr. Putin doesn't believe that the Cold War ended and has in fact ramped it up. And I personally find that argument pretty compelling.
And with that follows the logic that he sees America as an enemy and a threat. And so some of those opponents of Ukraine aid also are advocating, or proponents are at least open to U.S. warming with Russia. And I would point that out. If we're still in this Cold War, just listen to what Putin and other Russians say about the U.S. That's not an ally. That's an adversary.
So let's say Mr. Trump does decide that he becomes annoyed with Vladimir Putin. What would your advice be to the Trump administration vis-a-vis Ukraine? What should they do to raise the pressure on Russia?
Well, I think that President Trump has been annoyed at Putin, but he also ebbs and flows on that. And I think that he should be beyond annoyed. He should feel insulted. And he should feel, aghast at the loss of life. President Trump does constantly speak about that he wants the killing to stop. He often looks at the numbers of the soldiers, but look at what's happening with the civilians right now. We just talked about people are freezing in their apartments. My friend had to leave her apartment in Kyiv because her baby was freezing in the crib. So I think that President Trump needs to focus on what Putin is doing, not just what he's saying. As for what they should do about Ukraine, want to listen to Ukraine as well and listen to the European allies that have been focused on this. They ask for some key things, more sanctions enforcement. There's still more that can be gone after on the economy. More weapons can go to Ukraine. Right now, it's good that we're allowing NATO allies to purchase weapons for Ukraine. But of course, we could, look toward having Congress put another package together and authorize that. Don't threaten to cut off intel. Continue that collaboration and look at some more on the economic cooperation with Ukraine. There's a lot to benefit from for us as well. And we're looking at that a bit now on drone co-production also, but more can be done because really Ukraine needs money to produce a lot of what's there. And then be mindful in the negotiations. Don't push Ukraine more. They are not the problem. Remember that Putin is the problem. He doesn't want peace. And I'm sure there's a lot more things on the technical level in the negotiations, but it starts at the top of being clear-eyed about what the threat is.
In short, no moral equivalence.
Yes.
Now, President Zelensky also made and gave an important talk about what he believes will be a significant revolution in Ukrainian defenses in AI and drones. Can you tell us a little about that? What that would mean?
Sure. So what I would say primarily beyond just what he's said in his speech is that Ukraine is doing amazing things because of the necessity. So necessity breeds innovation, and Ukraine has amazing people on all sectors that are in this. And so they've got companies, they've got, the producers, the engineers, others working with folks on the front lines. They're constantly adapting. Russia is as well. They have, a different scale, but Ukraine on the innovation with the AI, I think the whole world can learn from them. And I've spoken to a Republican U.S. veteran who works in Congress who said, I'm worried in the U.S. we're not learning enough from them. We need this for future warfare. We don't want to miss these lessons. We should be doing more. So there's a lot. I think there's already some coordination, including private sector and public sector, but more should come. And it can't be just a one-off of agreeing on something and saying, here's the plan. It has to be constantly innovating and adapting.
Yeah, you do have to wonder if the United States military is taking full cognizance of what's happening in Ukraine. I know that there's considerable foreign investment into Ukraine as well, specifically in the drone sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's of course not just drones. There's other aspects, but I think that there is awareness within the U.S. military and the leadership here that we can learn from Ukraine, but what that means, what they invest in it, how they actually get those lessons in planning, I'm not sure, and I'm sure there's more that could be done. And that also means continuing to support Ukraine, and there's benefit for us there as well. Mentioned intel sharing earlier. We benefit from that intelligence that they are sharing as well. It's not just a one-way street.